afternoon, everyone. I hope you're doing your lunch. Thanks so much for being here. I want to take the time to introduce our lunch speaker, a very dear friend of ours, Don Mullan. Don was just appointed as an affiliate of our UNESCO network, our global network of UNESCO chairs, and it's just been an amazing author and presence in lots of different ways. I first read a book of Don's probably 20 years ago or so now. He wrote a documentary based on the Bloody Sunday tragedy. And the level of detail and the level of his journalistic integrity really led to a lot of the people in the tribunals and everything else, and Tony Blair and others, using it as kind of the Bible for going through and looking at how things happen. I had the pleasure this past year, along with Pat Dolan, to meet Don and start developing some friendships. And we've been doing some great things. He's going to talk a bit today about some work we're doing in Mazine and in Belgium. If you think about it, this is the 100th anniversary of World War I, and it's also the 100th anniversary of the Christmas truce, where the German and English players decided on Christmas Eve it was okay not to kill each other. And Don is doing some amazing work he's going to talk about there, trying to establish a UNESCO center at the spot, but also a peace and reconciliation center, and just some amazing things. He's written a bunch of other books, all sorts of things related to sport, all sorts of aspects of life, and just a tremendous presence. So please welcome him.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I want to begin by thanking the three chairs of UNESCO, Pat Dolan, Mark Brennan and Alan Smith, for inviting me, and also inviting me to come and associate chair of the UNESCO programme. It's a very, very great honour. I also want to thank the Department of Foreign Affairs, and in particular the Reconciliation Fund, who have in the last year provided me with some funding to develop the project that I'll talk about in a minute or two. Talking to Pat earlier about the presentation, we agreed it might be worth mentioning the fact that I'm dyslexic, but my dyslexia was not discovered until I was 38 years of age. And so I went through my childhood, my adolescence, my early adulthood, dubbed my intellectual capabilities. And one of the characteristics of a dyslexic child is very low self-esteem. But one of the great turning points was 1966. The World Cup that was broadcast from England was the first World Cup that was ever broadcast live. And like we have in any World Cup ever since, after the games, the boys would meet in the local green and would have a game of football, and they would fantasise about, the various stars that they had seen. And the two best players would always pick the teams in descending order of perceived giftedness. And the last two players had only one option, which was goalkeeper. And that's how I became a goalkeeper. But I discovered that I had good handling, I had good reflexes, I had good agility. And before long, I taught the guys that a good goalkeeper was as important as a good striker. And eventually, I was out there picking the team. And again, one of the great lessons was that I was able to turn an adversity into an advantage. And through goalkeeping then, I had an identity. Still to this day, I get a kick out of people remembering me as a goalkeeper. And I had a dream, I had an ambition. I wanted to be the Ireland goalkeeper. But in 1966, the inspiration came from the England goalkeeper, Gordon Banks. And I can't explain it, but I saw him that day and I had a hero. And I learned everything that I could about Gordon Banks. And I would even go into the local library and I'd go to the sports section and I'd look through for books with photographs of Gordon Banks, and while pretending to read the books, I'd actually be tearing the photograph out for my scrapbook. And in fact, I brought the scrapbook here, which I started when I was 10 years of age. 500-page wallpaper book of everything that I could get of Gordon Banks. And Kelly and Archbishop Tutu and Gordon Banks have signed it, and in their foreword to my boyhood memoir, The Boy Who Wanted to Fly, they actually describe the scrapbook as perhaps one of the greatest tributes by any child anywhere in the world to a hero. And again, what was really important is that my parents knew something important was happening to the youngest son. Because number one, I was playing sport. So I was out, I was being active, I was taking an interest, but also I was beginning to read and research and write. And I often say, I've done several books now, but that's my first book. And it's one I consider that's absolutely priceless. Now, one of the great moments of my life was in 1970, 6 weeks after Gordon Banks had made what many people consider to be the greatest save in the world. In fact, the page I have opened here in my childhood writing is "The greatest save the world has ever seen, Gordon Banks versus Pele." And that's the page I got them to sign, you know. So this man was a global sporting icon. And I came home one day and my sister was so excited she couldn't find anything to write with apart from lipstick. And I remember she used the lipstick to write on the mirror, "Dawn, see journal, Gordon Banks coming to Donegal." And I looked at the journal and there it was, my hero. And my only expectation was I'd stand on the terraces and I'd see him live. And this was at a time, you know, we didn't have Ryanair and we didn't have like cheap flights and stuff like that. So the idea of going to England was like going to the other end of the world. It just didn't happen, you know. So to actually see him. And my father wasn't into sport, but he knew this was important to me. So he agreed to take me to the match. But what I didn't realise, they hid the scrapbook in the boot of the car, and he drove into a hotel, parked facing a wall, told me to wait, and about maybe 5-10 minutes later, he came out all excited and says, "Tom, come here, come here." And I followed him in, and I saw my scrapbook on the desk of the foyer, and a tall man leafing through it, and then my father spoke the magic words, "Here he is, Mr. Banks." And I still get emotional. I still get emotional. Gordon Banks turned around, and it was like an audience with God. But the thing that I remember most was his respect. His gentleness towards me. Still remember the tips he gave me as a goalkeeper. Playing tennis table for reflexes, basketball for handling, taking the ball at my highest point. All of those things I remember. But it was his respect towards my parents. He was so gentle towards my mother and father because he saw in my mother and father his own parents who were working class parents. And he really treated them gently. But this was also very important because it was the beginning of the Troubles. And I was born in the Caribbean Estate, which became one of the most troubled areas in the Northern Ireland conflict. And I was a witness to Bloody Sunday. I was actually in the vortex of the killings that day. And things changed. And people were becoming, you know, very angry and distancing themselves. And many of my cohorts were, you know, for example, at the age of 15, Jim O'Hay, who was a wonderful man, who was our manager, a man who'd never married, he had no kids, he was a civil servant, and all his money he used for the football team, taking care of us. And one day he arrived to say, "Don, I have to bring you into the senior team." I was 15 years of age, and we were playing like semi-professionals who were playing in the League of Ireland and in the Irish League. 15 years of age. And how did I get my place? Tommy, the senior goalkeeper, was caught in a bank robbery in Buncrana. And that's where I got my place, but it was a sign that things were changing. And I have to say, we won it 1-0, kept it clean sheet. And I remember after the final, Jim O'Hay came with the trophy, they gave it to me. He was so pleased with my... But can you imagine like what that was doing for me as a kid? You know, in terms of my confidence, my belief in myself, just self-esteem and believing that I could do better and could achieve a lot of what, you know, the Galway manager was talking about earlier on today in his presentation. And I had the option of joining the IRA, and it passed my mind on many occasions. I remember coming home one time when I was stopped at an IRA checkpoint, and he was a young IRA man with a mask, wearing denim jeans and a red t-shirt, nursing an old World War I Lee Enfield rifle. And I looked at the eyes that were looking at me, And I knew that he knew that I knew who he was, and it was my best friend. So it was extraordinary, the pressure that was on us. But I had the memory of Gordon Banks, and I knew that not all British people represented what I had witnessed in Bloody Sunday that particular day. And I knew there are good people on the other side, and there always is good people on the other side. No matter what conflict we're in, there's always good people on the other side. And it's those people we need to form alliances with, because when the moment comes, they're the bridges that we really can build a foundation upon. And so Banks had a big influence on me, not choosing the path of violence. And I hope, through a lot of, I learned in sport that I became a good and a caring and respectful citizen, not just in Ireland, but throughout the world. And so that brings me to what Pat and Mark and Alan were anxious for me to talk about. It's a major project that I'm developing at the moment in Belgium, but with a very important dimension in Ireland and hopefully in other countries around the world at home before Belgium is engaged with. And I did a boyhood memoir called, initially, Gordon Banks, A Hero Could Fly. It was then published in London as The Boy Who Wanted to Fly, because they wanted to put the emphasis on the boy rather than the hero. It's currently being translated into Brazilian Portuguese to be published in October, and the royalties are going to the Pelly Little Prince Hospital, with whom I work now. And when the book first came out, the London Times magazine had it as a front page cover story. And out of that, a group called Truce contacted me, who were inspired by the football match that happened on Christmas Day 1914. So that began to introduce me to something extraordinary that had happened. And then I can remember it very clearly. It was the 9th of August 2008. I was in Barcelona with my family on a cheap holiday, and I was in a basilica. We were visiting on a place called Tibidabo on the outskirts of Barcelona, and I was sitting in this church and I had this mad thought, and it was, go to Flanders and find the field. And it was to see if I could go and find the field where the game of football took place. And 2 weeks later, I was in Flanders. And I found my way to a cross that former British soldiers had left in 1999 to mark the 85th anniversary of the Christmas truce. And it mentioned the football match, and I found it in an American blog, so that's why I went there. But I remember the cross was on a ridge, and behind the ridge there was a maize field that was fully grown, ready to be harvested, so I couldn't see dimensions. And I saw a little house further up to the right, and it was a two-story house, so I asked the lady, could I go in and have a look? And she let me in. It was a little art muse. And as I looked over this sprawling scene, which would have been no man's land during World War I, I just had this vision of creating the Flanders Peace Field. And it was inspired by a sports field in an American college that I had studied in called Iona College. And I always envisioned it as like an American type sports field, like for young people with bleachers and stuff like that. Not a big stadium, but a place for young people to come and to play and engage in. And so I began to work with the mayor, I began to work with the local parish, I began to work with the Mazines Peace Village, and I kept going back to Mazines. And I found that this was an extraordinary place that also had a very strong Irish dimension. But I didn't go because of the Irish dimension, but I kept going back because there were a lot of other elements. But one of the most important things was, there is the Mazines Peace Village that was built by the Flemish government, intended for young Irish people to be brought out because of the Troubles, Catholics and Protestants from north and south, where they would encounter each other. The reason for that was Mazines had been liberated by the Anzacs, the Australians and the New Zealanders, as well as the 36th Ulster and the 16th Irish. So Irishmen from the north and the south, Catholics and Protestants, had really grown to rely on each other and believe in each other and become enormous comrades during that war. And here's a place that can be a place of great reconciliation. And So we actually had the first game on the Flanders Peace Field. I mean, it was amazing to see this piece of mud being transformed, being levelled, and being cleaned, and all the stones being taken away from it. And then, you know, for the seeds to be put there, and then to see the grass grow. And last Sunday, in fact, the first game was played in it between a German and an English team. But the important thing, and this has not been made public, and I'm making it public today, the Mayor of Messines and the Chief Executive and the President of the Flanders Peace Field have invited the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister of the Northern Ireland Assembly, as well as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, to officially open the Flanders Peace Field. And that letter has gone 6 weeks ago, and I think it's time now that it's made public, because we really need them to actually accept that invitation. Because there's a lot of symbolism as well in having both Peter Robinson and Martin McGuinness side by side going to Flanders and actually opening up the Flanders Peace Field. Archbishop Desmond Tutu has been a wonderful supporter of this. In fact, here in this same stadium, in February 2009, he actually was the chair of a meeting to discuss the Christmas Truce and Flanders Peace Field project, and he called upon the GAA and the Football Association of Ireland, the Irish Football Association, the Rugby Union to support this project, as well as the churches and community groups and so on. And it's just wonderful to see it now coming to fruition. But Tutu has described the project as a gift of the Island of Ireland peace process to the European project of world peace. And that's a wonderful accolade to be built on. So we really need, now I've engaged with the GAA, I've engaged with the IFA, I've engaged with the Irish Rugby Union. We've just talked at the moment, but we need to have further discussion to try and move it forward. I've also had discussions with people in the FAI, and John Delaney has just texted me to say that I have permission to say that we're in discussions. That's UNESCO, as well as Cooperation Ireland, Flanders Peace Field project, about a major project next year, which will be based around the friendly between the Republic of Ireland and England. Because remember 20 years ago what happened, Combat 18 came to Dublin, and the game had to be abandoned because of a horrendous riot that happened in the stadium. We can't let that happen on this occasion. And there has to be a feel-good factor, and I think we can build something really special around UNESCO, Cooperation Ireland, Flanders Peace Field, and bringing young people, North and South, Catholic and Protestant, together to learn. So that's generally the project that we're working on. The really great thing about working with Alan and Mark and with Pat is that I'm working with educators who can also help us to put together like modules that can be taught in classrooms, primary level, at secondary level, and in universities. Not just in Ireland, but around the world. The aim of which then is they bring the young people then to have this experience on the Flanders Peace Field. It's a much bigger project as well around that, because just to finish off, the Christmas truce, the Pope at the time called for a truce. The Germans said yes, if the others agreed. The others didn't agree. And so he said, our project has failed. And I actually say now, thank God it failed. Because if it had been agreed, it would only be a footnote now. But it's how the truce came about is what is really so inspiring. Germans normally celebrate Christmas Eve more than Christmas Day. So thousands of little Christmas trees with clamps and little candles have been sent from Germany. And so they were probably cramped in the trenches, so when they lit the candles, they put them up on top of the trenches. So the British are watching these lights appearing, and one soldier describes them as the lights in front of a theatre. And then they hear, there's one beautiful story of British soldiers being stunned into silence by these gorgeous baritone voices coming from the trenches, German voices. And they're so beautiful, they listen until they taper out. And they spontaneously break into applause and begin to cheer the Germans and begin to sing back. And then, of course, curiosity is rising on both sides, and then heads begin to appear, and then chests and trunks and full bodies, nobody's firing, and they edge towards each other. and they agree a truce on Christmas Day. And they meet the next morning, and they help to bury their dead. They have joint religious services. They exchange, they share tea and coffee, wine and cognac and beer, cakes, chocolates that have been sent out from home, cigarettes, showed photographs of their loved ones, had photographs taken standing side by side, and they sat around in groups, and in the afternoon they played several games of football. They even found 2 old bicycles without tyres, and they brought those out and even had bicycle races with them. You know, so you can see the symbolism of the power of that moment that can really be built upon. But what's most important of all is that they encountered the common humanity. And when you encounter the common humanity of your enemy, it's very hard to kill them. And I think that's what's so important. And as human beings, we've far more in common than we have dividing us. I remember in terms of a major project, I'm not going to go into it, but to do with Haiti, I was introduced by a UNESCO colleague from Africa to a very famous African called Duda Dieng, who works at UNESCO. And he thought he was paying me a tribute by saying, Don has a black heart. And I says, no, Don does not have a black heart. Don has a human heart. And I think that's what's important here. We're human beings with this tiny little, literally a moisturized speck of dust in the context of the cosmos. And sometimes we get caught up in our own minds where we think we're the most important things in the whole of creation. We're not, you know. But we live in this beautiful planet, biosphere, and we've got to share it together. And we've got to celebrate difference, you know. And it's a wonderful opportunity just to be enriched by the difference of others. So that's why I'm so thrilled to be involved with Pat and Mark and with Alan and to develop this. And again, just I would love you to get involved in it and really allow this project as well to become one of the shining examples of the good that has come out of our peace process. Because I think it's important we have a major peace process, but I know, and you know, my colleagues as well from the Ardoin, the Shankill will also agree, we can't take it for granted. There's a danger that will fall back. Like it's like democracy, we've got to be alert and we've got to continue to be vigilant and we've got to continue working. And I think the Flanders Peace Field provides us with an opportunity to really come together and explore our own common humanity, but also bring something really good to the world. Thank you very much.